Once, heaven knew only light. At its center stood one angel, Lucifer, brilliant, admired, untouchable. But pride cracked perfection. The brightest angel became the darkest shadow. And if even heaven could break under pride, how safe are we? Stay with me, because this fall didn't just shake heaven, it still echoes in every human heart today. Most people think God's first masterpiece was the stars or the oceans. But what if I told you it was something far more radiant? The very first being God shaped with his own hands wasn't mountains, wasn't oceans, not even the stars. It was an angel, brilliant, breathtaking. His name, Lucifer, the morning star. Scripture calls him the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and beauty. Even Michael, the warrior archangel, looked up to him. But here's the danger of brilliance. The greater the gift, the heavier the burden. Because when the spotlight shines that brightly, it's easy to forget where the light comes from. Our gifts were never meant to make us greater than others. They were meant to reflect someone greater than us. And the moment that truth is forgotten, pride begins to whisper. Forget the giver, and even perfection can start to break. Perfection looks unbreakable, but the truth, even the brightest can crack. Lucifer had beauty beyond imagination, wisdom second only to God, an influence that touched all of heaven. But slowly, a whisper grew inside him. Why should my light point back to someone else? Why shouldn't it shine for me? That's how pride begins, not with a roar, but with a whisper. You know that whisper too. At work, I deserve more credit. In quiet moments, don't forgive. Hold the anger. Pride twists blessings into burdens. And the greater the gift, the greater the danger. Lucifer's brilliance wasn't the problem. The problem was his choice, to turn the gift inward instead of upward. And that choice didn't just risk his own heart, it shook the order of heaven itself. But why would God allow a world where saying no was even possible? In heaven and in us. If God could stop all rebellion, why didn't he? Why give angels and us the freedom to turn away? Because love without freedom isn't love at all. It's just programming. Free will means this. Love can be chosen or refused. Think of it this way. A parent can hold a child's hand forever, but real love is when the parent lets go and the child chooses to return. That's why God gave free will. Not robots, but real beings who can say yes or no. And freedom is fragile. Every parent feels it when their child stumbles. Every believer feels it when they forgive, not knowing if that trust will hold or break again. So here's the question. With that kind of freedom, will we reflect the light or try to claim it for ourselves? That was Lucifer's choice. And in choosing pride, his downfall began. But pride was only the spark. The fire came from a plan of God so shocking that even heaven trembled. Here's the twist almost nobody talks about, a secret in heaven, so shocking even angels trembled. God's plan wasn't just to rule creation, but to step into it, to become part of it. The Almighty, becoming weak, the Eternal, taking on flesh and blood. Jesus Christ, that's the Incarnation, God becoming human. Most angels were in awe, the Creator lowering himself to love what was fragile. Heaven erupted in songs of joy, but not Lucifer. To him, this wasn't glory, it was humiliation. Why should pure light bow to fragile humans? Why should perfection kneel to weakness? That thought burned like fire, and we've seen the same fire on earth. Leaders who refuse to serve, voices of pride that call humility weakness, people who crave the throne, but never the towel. So let me ask you, when power is in your hands, do you see serving others as weakness or as the highest strength? History proves it. The greatest weren't those who demanded glory, but those who chose to serve. Lucifer couldn't accept that. In rejecting humility, he rejected God himself. And from that silence, rebellion sparked. What began as a whisper of pride was about to explode into open war. What happens when heaven itself is divided? One dazzling voice calls for rebellion, but one humble cry answers back. Lucifer's silence turned into defiance. He whispered to other angels, "Why should we bow? Why kneel before flesh? We deserve the throne." His words carried weight. He was admired, persuasive, and for the first time, doubt rippled through heaven. But then, another voice, not the loudest, not the most radiant, a humble archangel, Michael. With a cry that cut through the heavens, he shouted, "Who is like God?" In that single question, everything was answered. Lucifer longed for equality with the Creator, but Michael reminded all, no created being, no matter how radiant, can rival the one who made them. Now imagine standing there. Would you follow the dazzling rebel or the humble defender of truth? We face that choice on earth too. Charisma can sway crowds, but it only takes one clear, humble voice to bring people back to truth. From whistleblowers to civil rights heroes, to ordinary men and women who dared to say, "This is wrong." Michael's courage proves this. Truth doesn't need the loudest voice, just the boldest heart. But for Lucifer, that cry was unbearable. Humility exposed his pride, and in his rage, whispers turned into war. The battle lines were drawn. Heaven itself would soon tremble. Light against shadow, brother against brother. The first war in history was about to begin. Imagine it, heaven divided. On one side, Lucifer, the morning star, once radiant, now burning with rage. On the other, Michael, standing for humility over pride. It wasn't just light against light, it was loyalty against rebellion, glory against self, brother against brother. Creation held its breath. Then, heaven thundered. Flashes of brilliance split the skies. Every strike was more than power. It was a choice, self-exaltation, or surrender to the Creator. At the height of battle, Michael lifted his sword and cried, "By God's power, fall!" A silence sharper than a blade, then shattering. Lucifer's brilliance broke. The morning star twisted into shadow. The one who once lit heaven was cast down, and he did not fall alone. A third of the angels followed him, radiant beings now consumed by pride. It was more than a defeat. It was a fall, and we've seen echoes on earth, leaders who seemed untouchable, stars who burned too bright, all brought low, not by weakness, but by pride that blinded them to mercy. Because stumbling is not the same as falling. We all stumble, but a fall comes when pride refuses to rise again in humility. That was Lucifer's choice, and if he could not take God's throne, he would turn his fury towards something else. And so, the battle moved from the skies to us. Lucifer's fall didn't end in heaven. It spilled into our world. If he couldn't take God's throne, he would strike at what God loved most, humanity, the same whisper that poisoned his heart. "You will be like God," was the very lie he spoke in Eden. And since that moment, the battle has never stopped. We still hear that whisper today. In marriage, you deserve better. At work, take the shortcut. Winning is all that matters. In quiet moments, don't forgive. Hold on to the anger. Different words, same lie. We've all felt it. Bitterness wears us down, but forgiveness sets us free. Look around. Families torn apart by greed, communities divided by hate, leaders who think they're untouchable. All of it echoes of the same rebellion. No, we may not see swords of light clashing in the skies, but the battle is real. Every choice, pride or humility, love or hate, is another strike in the war that began in heaven. But here's the hope. Just as Michael stood firm, we can stand too. Every time you choose humility over pride, forgiveness over bitterness, love over hate, you win a small victory in the cosmic war. And that's where Lucifer's story changes. Because even in the darkest rebellion, light has always been stronger. Lucifer's fall may sound like a tragedy, but it isn't a story of despair. It's a story of hope. Because in every rebellion, God's truth still stood stronger. When Satan tempted Jesus in the desert, every lie broke against Scripture. When evil roared in history, it always burned itself out. Tyrants rise, but they always fall. Hate shouts loud, but love whispers longer. And it's those quiet whispers of kindness, forgiveness, and faith that outlast empires. That's the final lesson of Lucifer's fall. Pride and hate are only shadows, and shadows cannot survive the light. So let me ask you, where do you hear those whispers of pride in your own life? And how can you answer them? With humility, forgiveness, and love? Share in the comments the one lesson you're taking with you this week. If this story gave you hope, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Because this battle isn't just ancient history, it's ours. And every time you choose light over darkness, you join the victory. And remember, this story doesn't end here. Revelation shows how the final battle unfolds and how good wins once and for all. So subscribe and stay with me, because next time, we open the last chapter.